Hello, welcome to another episode of Same Blood, where we have conversations with people. That's the gist of this. And today, I'm here with Keisha Wood. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Tim. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Now, the first question, and this is super random, but what does the M stand for? When we email, it always shows up as Keisha M. Woods.
That's because that's my middle initial. There's another Keisha that works at my job, and she's like Keisha N. Wood. So they had to distinct us apart.
That makes sense. Every time I see it, I'm like, I'm assuming it's just a middle initial.
It is just my middle initial.
It always shows up as Keisha M. Woods. And I'm like, all right, cool. I like it. Anyway, all right. So the idea, the gist of this podcast, the reason we got this whole thing started was that we wanted to have conversations where we just talked to people. We found things that we had in common. We talked about what made us similar, because the idea behind the podcast, the name Same Blood, is that we believe that we were all created by God. We all have incredible intrinsic value put there because we were created. And we all have, if you boil it down, we all have very similar hopes, dreams, aspirations. And what we need to do more now than ever before is stop making assumptions about other people that are based in stereotypes or ideas or just ignorance, and instead start viewing people more through the lens of their value and who they are, and let them define everything else. Let them tell their story, get to know them. And so that's the idea here. That's the whole concept behind the podcast.
That's the idea.
But we like to start out with a snack. Now, I asked you, I said, what is your favorite snack? And you said?
Albanese gummy bears.
Albanese gummy bears. So we have Albanese gummy bears. Now, as this is your favorite snack, I'll open this as you give the sales pitch for Albanese gummy bears. What is the sales pitch?
These are the best gummy bears in the world. Best one is once you eat them, you won't eat any other brand again. Okay,
so the goal of this podcast is to put other gummy bear companies out of business. You listening? Haribo? Haribo? I don't know. There's another thing.
I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it's Haribo or Haribo.
Yeah, but it's not Albanese.
It's not Albanese.
Yeah, well,
They're
here you go.
Thank
I'll
you.
give you this.
Are you gonna?
I'm going to have some for sure as well.
Some.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have people on the podcast, and they're always talking about their favorite snacks. I don't know if it's open far enough. Gummy bears stick together in Texas more than other states.
Well, I mean, it's hot enough here.
One of our previous guests, Claude Williams, his thing was it was gummy bears. It was like a sweet, chewy snack paired with a salty snack like Pringles. Okay. And so his theory, and I dig it. I think it's a good philosophy on life. Was that you want the salty to switch it up. So you start with like the sweet, and then you go salty once you sort of run out of your ability to keep eating sweet. And then as you eat the salty, it gets you hungry again for the sweet. So it allows you to eat more.
Doesn't that define the definition of sweet and salty?
Yes.
Because I like sweet and salty.
100%. And he just goes back and forth. Whereas I've just found snacks that are both sweet and salty.
And I think I've eaten both, but I just kind of had gummy bears and then had Pringles. I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah, so his philosophy, he wants to make sure he gets through all of the snacks that he was planning on it. So you do it together, and you get to eat more snacks.
I may have to try that.
And then he always tries to, who cares? He always tries to follow it up with a soda. So it's like a whole deal.
Okay, it's a thing.
He takes it very seriously. And I strongly encourage everyone to consider creating your own snack thing where you combine different options, put it together, create an experience. Just don't do it for 3 meals a day, every day.
It wouldn't be healthy.
No, it's a bad idea.
Not at all.
But these are amazing.
I told you.
Yeah.
I told you.
You know what it is? It's a good flavor, but the texture on these.
It's the texture and the flavor. Like you get that burst of the flavor in the gummy bear.
Man.
Told you.
This is prime. This is prime snack advice. I'd say this is not the most the best thing you're going to hear on this podcast, of that I guarantee you. But it's going to be up there. I mean, this is good advice.
One of the things to change your life if you start eating this.
Yes. Okay, so while we're eating some more of these gummy bears, a couple other favorites. Do you have a favorite movie?
You know how you do, but every time you hear that question, you have to start thinking.
So I ask it, what I like to do is ask it like this, because I know exactly what you're talking about. So is there a movie that when it comes on TV or you see it, you'll always kind of stop down and watch? Because I know there's movies that I'm like, I love that movie, but it's a little bit more of an emotional investment that I want to make on a regular basis. But if there's certain movies that if they're just on, I'm going to watch. I'm going to watch, I'm going to watch 20 minutes of it.
I actually have two like that. There's one that I'll turn on, and there's one I'll watch like that. It's The Notebook, of course. is one I'll stop and watch it every time it comes on. But there's this old dance movie, because I'm a dancer, called Fast Forward. A lot of people have not heard from it, which I think is crazy, but it's one of my, like, I intentionally watched the movie, and it's so set in the 80s, so I have to love it to
80s movies are just
make an effort to turn it on and watch it. Yeah,
that is great. Yeah. No, I definitely understand that. The Notebook one is a little trickier for me though, because I feel like if the Notebook's on, you have to be ready to sign up for just an emotional roller coaster. It's not like sitting down to a comedy where you're like, I'm just gonna have a good laugh. It's like, well, I'd like to be gutted for the next 2 hours. So
let me tell you, you're right. That is true. I agree with that. But for me, especially in the recent 10 years, watching The Notebook, it's the fashion for me. It's so their outfits, if you just really go back to and watch it and pay attention to the clothes, it's like I'm so a designer. But the clothing, because I'm a big fan of vintage in that era, so I'm always just taken back. I just look at the garments, over and over again, looking at the clothes.
Well, I can honestly say I've never watched The Notebook and thought about the clothing, but as soon as you say that, because there's memes of The Notebook everywhere, and you're like, oh yeah, there was kind of some cool fashion back then. Not that would, I wouldn't even know what cool fashion is. I mean, I wear plaid, so that's
plaid's cool.
Yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Are you a sports fan at all?
I am a sports fan.
Okay, favorite team?
It's gonna be. I'm gonna have to stay true because I love the Cowboys. I did, but they have disappointed me. So I have to kind of give all my focus to my favorite team, which is Seattle.
The Seahawks? Really? Why Seattle?
I'm a big Russell fan. I like the way he plays and the way the team plays. Like, they just play well. Good. You just get a good spirit off the team.
No, that's awesome.
That's always kind of been like one of my favorite teams for like the last 5 or 6 years.
So I was born in Tacoma, Washington. We moved down to Texas when I was 5, and so when we got here, for the first while, my mom was a huge Seahawks fan. My dad was from Buffalo, so he's like a Bills fan, and then he became a Cowboys fan. So I had this decision to make as I got older. I was like, I have to swear allegiance to one of these teams, either the Cowboys or the Seahawks. And I made the decision while the Cowboys were still terrible. They're still terrible. Yeah. But I made the decision. I was like, I'm going to be a Cowboys fan. That's who I'm going to be. And then the next year, the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. And I was like, I chose wrong. I chose wrong. No, I love Russell Wilson's amazing.
I'm choosing to have two. I said, I haven't given up on the Cowboys. I'm just disappointed. Right now, but they've been my two favorite teams. Right.
And I was really happy. I was happy when the Seahawks won. And Russell Wilson was coming out of college. I was like, this guy's amazing. And when he got drafted, I was like, he's cool. Awesome. Seattle. It's a good team. It's a good team. It's good. It's a cool place. Have you ever been up to the Northwest?
No, I want to go.
If you like the rain.
I know I was told be prepared for rain, but I don't mind the rain. But I just still heard Seattle is a pretty place, a good place to visit.
It is for sure. The weird thing about the rain up there is that it's more like you walk outside to just like a sweater of mist for days on end.
So that means I couldn't wear my hair at all there. It's probably super humid there, I figured.
We went up there for Thanksgiving a handful of years ago. We were there for, I think, almost a week. And it was gray and misty every single day almost the entire time we were there. And so you just walk outside and you're like, oh, it's not really raining. And then 7 minutes later, you're like, why am I soaked? Why am I wet? This is really bizarre. So it's not like the thunderstorms here.
Okay.
Texas, it'll just blow through and, wreck shop for an hour and a half. There, it's like, no, we got 6 days of this. But it's also gorgeous. And when the sun comes out, amazing.
I need to time it well so I can catch the sun out. And then if we go into the haze, then I'll just stay in the room and rest.
Yeah, it's a good plan. I like it. All right, so there are some favorites, and that's cool. I like it. You should definitely visit Seattle. Now, you mentioned you are a fashion designer, so tell me about that.
Well, I have a clothing line called Modish and Swank. It's a women's clothing line. So I actually have had it since 2011, but I didn't really release it until 2017. And so we went on the era of traveling. I did a show here in Dallas, and I did New York Fashion Week a couple times, London and Paris Fashion Week, and then came back and kind of reset, because there's still even a mode for us in fashion. Like, I learned a lot. Some designers, you don't really make a lot of residual income from the runway shows. So for me, it was to come back now and kind of restructure it to, okay, what do you need to really, really do to make your company be successful? So that's kind of where I'm coming out now as I'm beginning to release stuff again.
Okay, very cool. I know nothing about the fashion world. Again, clearly, the plaid shirt, I don't feel like I even need
Plaid
to say
is
anymore.
cool.
Yeah,
Plaid is cool.
yeah, it's been cool
Forever cool. Yeah, that's
exactly.
like a forever thing.
Exactly.
Like black and white. It's not going to go anywhere.
Exactly, 100%. Okay, but what got you into the fashion world? What made you decide to, obviously there's a passion for fashion, but you went and launched a business, launched a brand. Why'd you do that?
So it's funny. It was one of those things, I think it burned inside more for a while because growing up, I grew up around women that were very fashionable, like my mom, all of her sisters. My aunt used to dress me and two of my cousins like triplets, I think, until we were 16. And then it was just embarrassing and we had to stop it, you know. But so I've always been around style and clothes. I actually went to college to be a neurosurgeon. That's what I started going for. Big career jump, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So started there, but when I came to Texas, I came initially from my mom. She was in a really bad car accident, so she had to learn how to walk, talk, everything all over again. So I moved here and took care of her. And when I decided to stay, it just kind of was still there. And I was like, just go for it.
You know what? I think I've listened to a lot of stories from people who go build something really cool. They go make something. And oftentimes it's like, there's no guarantees here. This is really just a leap. And the difference between people who go build something and the people who don't, oftentimes it's just that first step saying, I'm going to do this. We'll just see what happens. We're going to jump and we'll go from there. So,
and it's funny, I found that some of the things too that you find you're most passionate about that you just do, you did it more frequently than you realized it. Like when I thought back over, because not even just fashion, like I have an event company because I love decor and events, but when I went and thought back about it and thought over it, I could remember as a child decorating stuff. I have an aunt that loves to decorate, so I was always around it. The fashion, you always kind of did it and was around it. So it's crazy when you bring it to fruition and you really do it. You think back about those times in your life when, man, I really was doing that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's very cool. I like it. So modish and swank. Now the word modish, when you first said it, I was like, wait, modest and swank? And then you're like, no, that's modish and swank. What? But I've never heard that before. So what's the origin of that?
A lot of people had, and it's so funny. Modish really comes from modern. For me, I kind of like the modern clean look, and then I like to be edgy too. So I was trying to bring both of the worlds together. So really, me and a friend were sitting down and we were thinking about all your common words like modern and simple and elegant, and we pulled out a thesaurus and we started looking at other words that meant those same words that we always use. And so modern kept coming up, swanky, and so we just kind of played with it. And
no, I like it. It's really cool. I like it. Yeah. No, like I said, and it makes sense, this modish, where it's like, it's kind of.
I laugh when people are like, modish. I'm like, no.
No. Yeah. Hey, you know what? I think having a name like that makes people go, wait, hold on. What was that again? It actually probably sticks in people's heads even better because it has that little tick where it's like, that's different. That's interesting.
Yeah, I like when you put it together, it had enough that would make people say, what's that? But then, like you said, it makes you think about it. So
yeah, very cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to get into, because we have talked before. Now, a lot of people that we've talked to on this podcast, that I've talked to on this podcast, I knew almost nothing about. But I have met you before. We have spoken a bit, and I got to hear a little bit about your story. Now, to set this up, I do want to say that because of the overarching belief of this podcast, what we're about, this idea that every single person has built-in intrinsic value because they were created, and they're created with a purpose, and they're created with value, right? It's built in, and we all share that. And when I was talking to you, when I heard your story about your husband and this whole situation, it struck me again as this thing that, like, this is an issue that people just need to know about. Just people in general, right? People in general. This is just a thing that people should know about. We should care about, and we should be having these conversations. Aside from drawing some political line in the sand or saying whatever, we should just be having conversations like this. So all that to say, I wanted you to kind of talk me through your husband's story and kind of where we're at right now.
Okay, so 12 years ago, my husband went to prison, and a month after we got married, he went to prison. And then like 2 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant with our daughter. And this stemmed from him being on probation for a case that he's already been dealing with that comes from that kind of issue we have in our system of, the thing between black men and cops. And so I won't go too much into his case because, like I said, it's a whole thing that he still has to go back and fight because it's not the truth. But it's that thing where cops are dishonest and you have that person versus a cop, especially a black man versus a cop. They tend to take, kind of the cop's side. And so it was that kind of scenario that even kind of started the whole process. So he ended up going to prison, ended up being given a 20-year sentence for a probation violation of evading. So we were like that. And to me, that was kind of during the era where I feel like they were just giving African-American men a lot of time, And so him going to prison, like we said, by no means, Christopher's not innocent, as far as the way you handle and take care of things and the way you need to do things and processes you need to follow. So for him, it was like, okay, I got some stuff I'll work on. He was very angry at first with the time, that was given. But then as he grew, even in his relationship with Christ, he was like, I know I got things to work on. So we were like, surely after 10 years,
right.
10 years, that's a long time, like this will be over. But when he got to the phase of being eligible for parole, then he's been denied twice in the last 2 years. And the reasoning was likely to commit the same offense. And it's like, my theory behind that is, so if someone commits a crime, whether they're wrong, innocent, or whatever, they go do the time. That's the law. I don't have any problems with it. But you mean to tell me, especially after 10 years, if it's not some major federal or murder or something, somebody doesn't deserve the chance to come home and try again because you feel or you say on paper they're likely to commit the same offense, and then you start this thing of protesting their release just because you don't want them in your district, So it's to me, it's the reform side of not treating people like they truly deserve another chance after they've had something happen. I've learned you don't know what people went through in their lives or how they grew up. That plays a big part into some people's decision, whether a father was there, whether a mother's there. There's a multitude of reasons to why people act out. And I feel like people deserve, another chance and should not be held or bound down because of a system or, some outdated law that people have. So we just really need, help around the reform issue with prison and one time that people in general are being given, and then the process of people coming home, men and women, color doesn't matter. It's for everybody that is going through that system. Yeah, we get hit a little bit harder with it. We do in the African-American community, but it's an issue around the board.
Right, and one of the things that you mentioned previously when we talked about this was that your husband in prison has been doing everything he can, right?
Yeah.
He's been taking the opportunities that are there to that you would think, if you looked at the situation, would let you know this is someone who is actually was making the changes that you're talking about. That he was going through and he was going to handle some things that he wanted to handle, that he wanted to deal with.
Yeah,
and so
I mean,
you
like
mentioned
for
that.
him, the unit that he's in is a faith-based unit with a program. He went there under the, mindset that I'm going to go through this program and then be released. And he's been there 2 years, never put in a program, just kind of working and waiting to get in it. But in that 2 years, he still completed every single class in that place that you can complete if you're not in a program. He's been in the business expo where he's had an investor be and wanted to hear about his idea. I've talked to the investor on the phone because he called me and gave me all of his notes to give back to him when you're done. He's a trustee, which is the highest level you can be in prison. He's worked for Habitat Humanity, to where they leave and go out in the community and they're working. But then it's like your reason to not come home is likely to do the same offense or you're just a criminal. I'm like, that's just crazy to me. So it's like you're not really looking at people taking the steps to make the changes to make their lives better and visually look at their file and they don't have interviews with them, so you're not gauging it off of them. You're not making that in your gut feeling about a person because everybody's not coming to a room where they're speaking for themselves. So it's like you are literally just looking at a file and choosing what you're going to do based on your feelings or a file. And I'm like, but you got people's lives at stake. Like we have a daughter that's 10 while you're making this decision that needs her father. And we've made it work the best we have. We've beat the system. He still helps me. He calls, he reads with her, he helps with homework. So we're making it work the way we can, but it's just an unfair system that needs attention.
Right. And that's one of the things that when you talked about it, I was thinking about just the idea that I knew and know nothing about this, right? So just even the idea of how how parole would work and the idea of protesting. You mentioned that you hadn't even really heard of.
Yeah, like I'm with you because I mean I've never gone through anything like this before either. So I'm like you, I didn't even understand what any of it meant. I had to begin to educate myself, more living with it and dealing with the circumstances. I had to educate myself on it. And the more I've heard stories from him, from other guys, and you hear other people's story, and I watch certain shows, I'm like, dang, it's a real problem over here. Like I see you have people like, Kim Kardashian that has stepped up, and you see more people coming out to lead the charge on that side. But it's like we need a whole lot more people and a whole lot more work on that side of prison reform and people's lives and what should be going on while you're in prison. Like, I don't understand why there's not more, programs or classes really geared towards getting to the root of what was the issue that even got you there. Like, really helping people change. It's like you don't have a lot of that in there and not so much set right when you come out. But it's like, but the fight to get out, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I think about, because you use the term, people talk about like the idea of prison reform, right? And that's one of these topics that as soon as you say it, you get some lines drawn in the sand where it's like, you have some people who are like the whole system just needs to be completely, wiped out, right? And you got other people who are like, no, we need to, don't change any. It's like these very, very strong lines that are drawn, and I think they're drawn on kind of the extremes. They're drawn on the extremes of either side of the issue. But there's this place in the middle, right? There's this idea that if, you have to have laws, right? You need the system, but you need it to work well, right? And to say like the idea of protesting, right? Parole, and not even understanding how that process works, right? If somebody's going to do everything that they can do, or everything that's put in front of them to do to get the opportunity, to get out, and then to not even really be explained. So why is this not happening? Like, how did you come to this conclusion?
Right.
And to have this amount of kind of ambiguity about it, that's where I think you can find a lot of people who can hop on board with this, who can say like, you don't have to think the whole system needs to be completely just, throw it all out, right? And you also don't have to be this person that's like, no, don't change anything, it's perfect. You can say, hey, look, there's issues, and that's okay, because we're always trying to look at the world and say, how can we fix it? How can we make it better?
Well, you got to think about it too. The world is changing and evolving, and they say it all the time. When you think about business, you've got to evolve to how the world is shifting. Well, why would that not apply in a system that was built so long ago on people that are not even here, and the world is not even viewed that way the same anymore? So you're going to have to update, your practices based on what's happening in your world, but from what they created prison to be and where it is now, and where our world is now today, there hasn't been much change. And like you said, no, I don't believe you have to throw out the whole system, but I do believe you have to go to the bottom of it and break it open and look and say, okay, this worked, this don't work, this too harsh, this not going to change, and this ain't going to do anything. And you have to take the foundation that's there and change it. Or if you don't see where you can change it, then you need to throw it out and create something new. But I really feel like they can break that system open and look at what's not working from the time when that was even created to now. Right.
Well, and what you talked about, just the idea of like, you don't even know how the protesting, like what does it even look like? There's no transparency there, right? And I think one of the reasons that there are people who are so incredibly frustrated, understandably frustrated with what's going on, is that there's not any real transparency in it. And when you have that level of secrecy, I guess, or that level of just sort of power without transparency, it makes people question and like, so what are we even doing here? It doesn't feel like it's a system that or a situation that's really that you can trust. And when you don't have it, you don't have trust in a system, then then what are you doing here? That's really
like you said earlier, when you say you're somebody that you go and you do the work, you put the work in, you choose to be better, and then you come up for parole and they deny you, pretty much telling you because you're the same person you were when you came in here. So you're like, well, all this work I'm doing, where is it going that nobody's even paying attention to the progress that I'm making? You're just making a decision about me based on your feelings and running with that, or based on something you think. But then there's no way you could have, if y'all are filing this stuff like you say, look at everything that I do and think that I haven't changed
Right.
or don't deserve no change, especially when you've never been to prison before. It's your first time ever, on that side of the system. So to just kind of deem people off like that, I'm like, that's going to rock anybody's mental. And then when they start acting out. See, this is why, I can't let you out. But it's like if they're doing the work and constantly be told no, what do you think that's doing to people's mental mindset, especially when you're already in kind of like, this hole in this cell, whether you put yourself there or not, or you accidentally got there. But I'm talking about after you've had years and years of this, and you want somebody to continue to put the foot forward to do better, but you're always going to bound them back. Now, what you think that's going to do to their mind?
Yep. Yeah. And this is a conversation that, as far as, how do you fix the whole thing? And I think people get overwhelmed with this idea, right? And that's why for me, like, I don't know what the whole answer is, right? Because I don't even think we fully understand what even some of the issues are, right? Yeah. But there are things like this, right? Where you say a step, a step here, because for me, one of the goals should be that when you have people who made a mistake, right? But they've done what they needed to do, right? They've done what they needed to do to change what they needed to change to get where they need to be, to where like they should have the opportunity, they should have the opportunity to get back out and to be out and to be with their family and
live their lives.
Absolutely. That those are the situations you really want to look at, because that's what's really affecting people's lives in just a real serious way. And I think that's where you need more transparency and just more conversations about it. And if you open it up and you say, hey, there's some issues here, well, then you should want to fix them.
Right. And like you said, we can't, like, it's such a big system. We couldn't bite it all off in one day. But like you said, if we start with those small things, like what is the process of parole? Like, what do you need to do? What are those steps? What needs to take place for somebody, to be, come home? And if you are denied, like, how long can you, like, you can legally really do that to the end of the sentence? I guess you can, but it's just like really understanding those small things. Like, what is protesting? What is the process? Well, how does my file go from a parole board? Like, does it go to a DA? Does it go to my hometown? Like you said, like really knowing the full process along the way of what, someone's loved one is going through. And I think that should even be outlined for families. Like, this is the process. Often there's barely any communication, with the system and families anyway, too. So you never really know a lot either. But I think it needs to be, I know it's meant to kind of be this place where you're just thrown because you've done something wrong, but it needs to be so much more than that. Our world ain't gonna never change not trying to help people be better. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's really what I wanted to get to is and just get that message out, get this story out, because this is something that we can, and I personally believe we should be coming together around. You don't have to agree on everything to say, hey, this is like, we need more transparency here. We need more transparency. We need to look at this and we need to make it better. Because we should always be challenging ourselves to make all of these things better, especially when people's lives are hanging in the balance on this, when their freedom is on the line, when it's, you need to always be looking at these things and saying, are we really doing a good job here? Is this really what the best way to do this? And if it's not, well, we should want to change it.
And I'll go a step forward. When I say prison reform, like I even see it past the four walls of the prison. It's even like the places out here. I was watching a show and there was this lady crying that she had gotten out. She had probably been in prison, she said, like 4 or 5 times. She had drug problems, and I guess whatever state she's in, she always has to go to a halfway house for 6 months when you come out. But she was like, the halfway house she was going to, she was in there with the same people that she used drugs with, and even the dealer said, hey, use this. So she would always keep falling back down. So I'm like, why would you let someone out and require them to go to the place that know is constantly creating the issue, that's going to make it impossible for anybody to change? That's why, even like you said, for me, even past Christopher coming home, my rehabilitation center that I want to do, that I started just only wanting to do it for just the homeless, that immediately changed for me to make it a place where all people coming out of prison, or whether you're coming from being homeless, can come and truly take them through the process of rebuilding their mind, giving them tools that they never had that they need to really rehabilitate people. I'm like, I have a heart for people, so I really want to see people rehabilitated. So when I see the stories of all races, any gender with the prison system, like, it's really, really sad. Because it's like from in there to coming out, it's not really built around helping somebody be better. Like I said, you got a couple of good programs out there, like the one I mentioned, Tori, that's at my church, and a couple other good programs around the city. But there's not a lot of good programs that are built around helping people really come out and go somewhere that's going to really start the process of you being different or changing like you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for me, it's all about finding things that we can come together on. You know, you can always find things that you're going to want, that you're going to be different on, that you're going to have different opinions on. And if you just focus on those, you're not going to be able to move forward, you know, and you're just going to continue. We're going to continue to have this fight that we have in our country right now, in our world, where it's like, we're just drawing these crazy battle lines, and it's like, there's so much that we can come together on. You don't have to agree on everything, but just this idea of like, it's a good idea to be looking at these situations and saying, how can we do better? What can we do to improve people's lives? What can we do to help fewer people end up back in prison? You know, because that should be the goal. That should be the goal, because we value people. And if you make a mistake, that happens, but you should want people to get back on their feet.
Yeah,
you know?
We got to get back to humility. I feel like we've been off that for a long time, just as a society as a whole, like human compassion for people. We have lost that so much. I said we need some of those good old school classroom settings. You know, you put 10 chairs in a circle in a room and you bring in people with different views that don't get along, and like literally sit there and without getting wild and mad and fighting it, like really hash it out. Like if it gets a little heated in words, that's okay, but really hear each other's differences, and then hear, why do you feel that way? But now let me educate you on how that's not true. Let me tell you this, and like really have those discussions where, like you said, you hear each other. And you might not view the same, but being able to come away with me having a little bit more knowledge about you, Tim, and Tim, you have a little bit more knowledge about me, you know, and at the end of the day, we can agree to disagree. I feel like that's the thing that we've lost. It's gotten so, you know, violent and irate that you can't even believe like you believe, and I believe, you know, like I believe, and then we can still just be able to agree to disagree, like all the physical. It's just too much.
Yeah, it is too much. That really is the whole case. It is too much. And if you don't want that to be the case, if you don't want it to be too much, if you would like to see people sit down and talk and disagree and come to find things in common, then you have to put in the work, you know, and it should be the most obvious thing and everyone should be doing this, but it's not yet. But I hope that it will be. I got hope we're going to circle back around. Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question. What would you say is your purpose in life?
I think I just told you. I think it's to do everything God wants me to do with people. I like I said, I know He put me here for people just from how I am, the things I've done in the past, and the things He's given me to do going forward. So for that, it's just to really, really help people.
Awesome. That's a fantastic purpose. Well, thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation. Thank you for watching. Hopefully, the goal for this is that you listen and you hear a story and you hear about something you may not have known about, and that you're open to just having these conversations, just listening and understanding, and that there are things we need to be addressing, we need to look at, that we should. And I think this is one of them. Yep. And it's not to say that we have all of the answers, right? But it's to say that the questions are good to have.
Yes.
We should have them, and we should want to answer them, and we should want to fix things that are wrong, because people matter.
Yep.
Because people matter.
That was perfectly said.
Well, thank you again so much. Thank you for watching,
Yes.
and we will see you guys on the next one.